Welcome to the Casual Shenanigans Tech Podcast, a podcast where Dave and myself, Jeremiah, answer your mostly computer build related questions. Hey, Dave.
We should move into the realm of mall kiosk phone repair questions too, I think.
And why is that, Dave?
It's a booming market, Jeremiah.
Is it? Tell me about it.
Booming market. And it has nothing to do with the fact that my Nexus 5 is currently in many small pieces spread over my desk.
The simple quest to repair a faulty power button has basically destroyed your phone. To be fair, I mean, with the broken power button, it's not like it was going places anyway. But
yeah, I feel like 300 reboots per day was probably gonna, kill it all on its own. But I just finished the job. Although I did appreciate that once I had actually taken a pair of pliers and removed the faulty button, that helped for a while. I could trigger the power button with a screwdriver. But then the switch itself, I believe, is bad inside because eventually it started acting like the power button was being held down anyway, despite the fact that there was literally no button in the switch for it to be pressing against. There's nothing in there. I ripped it out. But yeah, it's an adventure. I will say that I am very impressed with cell phone technology just because I popped up in the Nexus 5. I was just so this is 80% battery and the world's tiniest little motherboard and CPU.
And that's pretty normal. I mean, that's...
Yeah. It's just it's pretty crazy to see it laid out. Because, you look at a phone and you're yeah, that's small technology, but man, the battery really is most of it. It's crazy tiny. And also, I don't enjoy working on cell phones.
No one does. All right. It's now time to start the show with the Rig Report.
Rig Report. Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Dave, last episode, your internet was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think your desk chair was here yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you had not had any Windows Update problems. Why don't you give everybody an update on how all that's been going?
Wait, that was before the Windows Update issues?
Yes, it was. It was a month ago.
I think I was still getting the freezes because that started when the updates dropped at the beginning of March, but I hadn't had the wipe yet. TLDR is that Microsoft screwed up their own Windows 10 updates, released a totally corrupted, I believe it was the DirectX input driver that caused computers to get CPU interrupt errors and blue screen and lock up when you plugged in an official Microsoft Xbox One controller into a computer running Windows 10. Two of their newest and fanciest and most promoted products, their Xbox One system and Windows 10.
No bitterness. Yeah.
Yeah. Now fighting together against you, the consumer. Yeah, official update. You can't stop it from happening. You can avoid the update for a week and then it installs anyway. I had managed to uninstall one of the two updates that installed the bad drivers, but the lockups had already done the damage. My system restore points were corrupted, and eventually my OS would not install any updates. I couldn't do any admin actions. I couldn't plug in any USB devices. The operating system, because of all the hard locks, was corrupted, right? It was in bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
So a week before vacation, while trying to prep videos and whatnot, and while still working from home, I had to reinstall Windows on a Friday afternoon and get everything reinstalled in 8 hours for the work I wanted to do that weekend and the next week. But a fresh Windows installation is always nice. I just prefer when it happens on my own terms,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you do this, Jeremiah, but I've done this setup for a long time for my PC. My SSD is my boot drive. It has Windows on it, and my main programs, my Autodesk programs, my Adobe software, and my most played games. But all of my documents and data are on external hard drives and secondary drives. Do you do that too?
Yeah. My SSD only holds my operating system, my important productivity programs, and a couple games. That's it.
Yeah, and I keep everything backed up anyway, but when I went to wipe the OS, I just went into my case and unhooked the hard drive cables from all my other hard drives, only leaving the SSD, reinstalled Windows, and then just relinked all of my documents libraries and all, which are on the D and F drives, and reinstalled Steam and told it where its folders were on the other hard drives. And, reinstalling Windows is never what I would call fun, but I just watched Netflix on my phone, which is now broken. I was up and running in what was a pretty decent amount of time. Like, 10 years ago, a wipe like that, you would have been fighting to rebuild your workflow for a while, but it was tedious, but not super painful, It wasn't bad.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't reinstalled in a while. I did the Windows 7 to Windows 8.1 upgrade. So I know there will be a clean install coming at some point, because I think I will take the Windows 10 upgrade while those are still being handed out. But I think I have till, June? Something like that.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like part of the problem that I had the update issues were because I'd done the upgrade, which worked fine for 8, but I just feel like don't risk it.
Now, so what happened? Did you do the upgrade again for this?
Yeah. No. The latest reinstallation was a clean one, like from scratch.
Oh, no, sorry. I mean, did you do the bad update? Have you had to run that yet?
I have, but I have not plugged in my Xbox One controller in like a month now. I'm afraid to, honestly. I told Steven it's like a landmine. I'm just afraid to touch it.
Now, what are you going to do then?
I'm watching for an official report from other people that have had this issue, because literally thousands of people have had this exact same issue. I want to see when the April updates drop, which I don't think they have yet, and see if it's officially resolved there, because it is resolved in the developer's build. Like, Microsoft has like a ticket, and it's been checked off the list. DirectX input driver issue corrected, but that patch is not on the main build of Windows yet. So until it happens and I see other people say, yes, my computer is not blue screening when I play Rocket League, I'm not going to chance it. Once Sounds in a month was enough.
Sounds good. Yeah, that sounds like the right decision.
But yeah, for my Windows 10 that I upgraded to in December, it was from an 8.0 new installation, upgraded to 8.1 like 8 months later, and then upgraded, in December to Windows 10, and that was probably starting to push it a little bit.
I don't think I have anything new on my rig to... Well, no, I guess I do. I mean, I've made changes.
Yeah.
I was using a pair of Mica MB42Xs as my speakers, and they were being powered off an old Sony little stereo receiver that I'd stripped the wire connectors. It had proprietary connectors, but I cut them off the old speakers and wired them onto speaker wire and added them onto these micas, and they sounded fine. And I was using those with a Polk PSW10 home theater sub thing that I'd gotten on a super cheap sale. So it was like a cobbled together system. It sounded pretty good, but it wasn't super accurate. And part of that was they weren't in a great position, and part of that was they were, just home music listening speakers. Mm-hmm. So I've picked up a pair of JBL LSR 305s, which are a pair of near field powered studio monitors. So they each have their own amp, and they each require their own power plug and signal being plugged into them, and they sound fantastic. Not a lot of bass, but very, very accurate sound, very flat sound, and I really, really like them. I can actually mix audio on my speakers now, and for years I've been using only headphones because I had nicer headphones than speakers.
That's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah, but they sound awesome. The stereo imaging is pretty amazing. I'll have to let you play something over here sometime.
Maybe some racing?
Yeah. Well, for racing, you get more out of it, like Witcher, perhaps. More of those atmospheric
you
sounds.
have my attention, my lord.
Racing sounds okay, but I think The Witcher and something would sound better. But yeah, I really like it. And I'm currently, if my voice sounds different to anybody, I'm testing out a Rode NT USB mic. Singularity 80, Casual Shenanigans community member, had this mic, and he was moving on to a different one because this one picked up his keyboard a little too much, or just wasn't a good fit for his setup. So I'm testing it out for a bit, see if it's going to work, and maybe Casual Shenanigans will be picking up another mic to distribute to somebody. But yeah, let's start with the emails. I think I just said let's start with emails. Let us start with the emails.
Let's start with email, comrade.
You can write into casualshenanigans@gmail.com, just like Ray did. And actually, Ray is responding to last time he wrote in, and he had a Dell, it's an Alienware X51. So, I mean, it's made by Dell. And he's had the OEM 4GB GTX 760 Ti. Or no, 2GB 760 Ti, which is a proprietary card that was only in those Alienwares. We figured that out. And he wanted to replace it with a 970, and we told him, I believe, to get the short one, and it wouldn't be a problem. So he says, hey, thanks for responding. The 760 Ti is the Alienware X51 OEM card. We were a little confused because NVIDIA has never made a 760 Ti for any other application. I did pick up a 970, a 4GB GeForce GTX 970. I opened up the X51 to replace the card, and the 760 is literally more than twice the length of the new GTX 970. It fits into the slot, but the power connector is an 8-pin, while the X51 only has 6-pin connectors. I've ordered a 6 to 8-pin adapter. Hopefully this will work. But am I missing something? Why did the connectors change from a 6 to an 8-pin? Do you know why, Dave?
Oh, because graphics card manufacturers hate you. And the real money is made in cables, as everyone knows, as Best Buy knows.
Yes. So those 2 extra pins are not actually carrying any extra power. They're 2 extra ground pins. But they let the cable carry more power. So the 6-pin can support up to 75 watts, and I believe the PCI Express port can also support 75 watts. But an 8-pin can support 150 watts. So your 970 must need a little bit more power, or they wanted a little more overhead. And that's why it has an 8-pin. So you can absolutely convert from a 6 to an 8-pin. It just adds the extra grounds. And from everything I've read, it's totally fine. Should not be a big deal.
That's actually info that I had forgotten about.
I didn't know until I was looking it up for this. I honestly didn't remember.
I had the same issue with a card upgrade probably 6 years ago now, and I Googled it. It's been a long time, though.
Next email is from Jacob. He wrote in and wanted to build a computer that could play 2 games at once, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And we recommend he try out pluralinput.com. And we made our recommendation of kind of what to do, and our recommendation was build 2 computers. But if you want to make this crazy computer, here's how we do it. He wrote back and said, okay, so I'm not really too serious with the build. I honestly just thought it'd be fun for you guys to toss around the idea. It was fun. It was cool.
It was confusing, but it was amazing.
Just because I thought it would be a funny topic, which it certainly was, and I guess I wasn't clear and worded it too seriously. But it was all in fun. I also know it would be definitely cheaper just to buy 2 towers separately. Thank you for taking my off-the-wall question and actually talking about it. You are most welcome. All right. Next email is from Seth. Seth wrote in, and he won Fallout 4 during our 2015 Lootcast.
Nice.
But he was using an AMD 4100 as his CPU, and he was thinking about doing an upgrade. He wasn't sure if he was going to go Intel or get a FX 8350 or something like that.
Right. And
we recommended, let's see, bring up the list. We recommended his cheapest upgrade was an i3-6100, an ASRock H170 motherboard, and 8 gigs of G-Skill RAM. That's $235. It would get him up to speed. That'd be a great hyper-threaded dual-core gaming rig. But he writes in and says, greetings, Seal Slappers. Or he wrote back and said, thank you for taking the time to respond to my questions on your podcast and offering up your advice to my situation. After getting laughed off the podcast for my AMD 4100 CPU, you weren't laughed off. It's slow. It's very slow, but it's okay.
It was honest laughter.
Laughing with you. Hopefully you're laughing. I took your advice to heart and took a long, hard look at my wallet, and then I decided if women don't like me for me, perhaps my new 6600K would pique their interest. It would at least be a good conversation starter. Am I right? Well,
I'm listening.
4K monitor and hexacore aren't good conversation starters. Take it from us. So,
I don't know. James seems pretty hooked.
Yeah, actually, for speakers, there's something called the WAF, the wife approval factor. That people talk about, like in professional reviews of speakers, they mention the WAF.
That's amazing.
Because in the world of like audiophile speakers, it is, and these are completely, asexual speakers of all kinds, stereo speakers. There's nothing about being an audiophile that is particularly gendered, but literally all of them are men. It's like the entire genre. Like the entire fan base, the entire whatever you want to call it, customer base, they're all men. So anyway, based on our feedback, he purchased an i5 6600K, a Hyper 212 cooler, an Asus Z170 motherboard, 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and a Fractal R5 case. Those are all fantastic decisions. If he gave us that budget, like the new budget he spent, that's exactly the parts we would pick.
Yeah, that's an amazing build. Oh, man. That's...
He said, I was looking at the Core i3 you suggested, as well as some older i5s, but for the money and what I was seeing and peace of mind buying new, I went with the 6600K. That meant I had to pony up the money for a motherboard and RAM. The ocean is bullshit. Team Double J are onto something. It's the world's largest conspiracy. Thank you, Oscars.
Team Double J. Please don't make that a thing.
But yeah, that's awesome. If you wanted to spend the extra money, you definitely made all the right decisions, and you obviously listened to this podcast, especially with that Fractal R5. You hear that, Dave? He says it's his favorite purchase was the R5 case. Really good case to build in. Feels like quality and a true pleasure to build in, and it's silent. I agree with all those things. Now, it doesn't look like an ammo can.
So, for you guys that are also setting up your computer and your office in your workshop and armory, you don't want that case, is what Jeremiah is saying. So if you specifically have an armory/home office...
I mean, if you feel the need to show off everything I own looks like it belongs to a gun, and then I guess, maybe the Corsair C70 is a good choice.
I mean, that aluminum body on that 980 Ti, it just looks military.
Yeah, the 980 Ti is at the special military edition.
Yeah, because it's too expensive.
The Titan would be the military version. It's basically just as fast, but it's professional, so it's way more expensive because it does a couple super obscure things a little bit better.
Quadro, you're paying for the certification.
So anywho, next up is Tristan. Hey guys, longtime fan, and Tristan has written in, not to tech, I don't think, perhaps maybe once, but he's written into the podcast and commented on stuff quite a few times. So he is definitely a longtime fan. Thank you for writing in, Tristan. I've written in before and took your advice to get an SSD. Oh boy, were you guys right about how much of a difference it makes.
Yes.
Anyways, to get to the point, I'm looking to upgrade again soon. Man, you don't have to apologize and get to the point. That was like 1.5 sentences. I like where your head's at.
Have you heard our podcast?
He says, my dilemma is that I don't know whether or not to buy a 980 Ti now or wait till the new NVIDIA series drops. What do you suggest? Ooh. Some games I do play... Well, no, listen to this. Some games I play are DayZ, Arma, Battlefield, Total War, and I run these games on a 1080p monitor. But I would like the possibility of 1440p gaming in a year or so. His current specs... a i5 4690K, mildly overclocked to 4.3 GHz, a Hyper 212 Evo, a Gigabyte Z97 motherboard, 8 gigs of G.Skill RAM, a 480 gig SSD, 1 terabyte Western Digital Caviar Blue, and last but not least, he says a pitiful GTX 760. Now that is not a pitiful GPU, that is the GPU that is in the potato masher.
That's a potato mashing GPU.
And you will respect it. Okay, so Dave.
Yes.
He wants better performance. Should he buy a 980 Ti now or wait till the new NVIDIA series drops, considering that he plays DayZ, Arma, Battlefield, and Total War on a 1080p monitor and maybe wants to do 1440p in a year?
Well, first up, I just saw today that we have the first official rumors.
Oh, the official rumors.
Yeah, the official rumors. So not like back alley channeled rumors, but like... rumors based off of some hardware spec sheets for the new NVIDIA cards on the Quadro, like the workstation side of things, and we have some estimated dates of possibly a new launch in June. Now, what do you think for the likelihood of that actually happening?
That would be over 18 months since the last launch.
Mm-hmm.
So, or the last major launch. So I'd say it's time. If it doesn't happen by June. It has to happen in the next few months after that, or maybe not. They're still selling like gangbusters. I guess it doesn't have to, but following tradition of the past 10 years or so, we'd expect it to happen then.
I think it's likely because we've actually already seen the workstation cards at, I believe it was GDC last month. Like, we've actually seen them. Like, they exist. We know the specs. They should be available for sale pretty soon. So I think the consumer cards, the GeForce cards coming along in June is likely. But for Tristan, that leaves the question, does he wait? Does he buy now? I would say no matter if he gets a 980 Ti or a new card, I'd say wait, because either you're going to have the option for new cards or you're going to have cheaper old cards. And if he's not gaming at 1440p yet, the games he's playing, his current card is doing a decent enough job at 1080p.
That's part of the thing. DayZ, Arma, and Total War, a new GPU is not going to make that much of a difference.
Well, unless you're playing Attila Total War, that's a GPU crusher. But don't worry, take our word for it. A 980 Ti will still not be enough to max that game out. It's a bit brutal.
Well, that's the thing. My GPU's got plenty of headroom for Total War. I play at 1440p and I lock to 30 FPS, and the GPU's fine. It's the whole game is just slow. So the CPU will spike, the GPU will temporarily spike. Like, there are some fancy features you would have to turn down to get good performance, but your main bottleneck is just the game.
Right.
So, and then DayZ and Arma, of course, are CPU hogs. You have a good CPU, so that's no problem, but you're not really going to get a ton better performance, especially in DayZ, going up to 980 Ti. Now, Battlefield, you will get some benefits, but a 760 can max out Battlefield 4 at 1080p, I would assume. Max it out or come very close to maxing it out.
For sure.
So I'd say if you want to get something now, get like a 970. Because here's the thing. The cheapest 980 Ti's are going for like 580. Like, that's the cheapest on sale will be 580. You can get 970s for almost exactly half of that. And they are almost exactly half as fast. So that seems pretty fair. But at 1080p, they will be a massive jump over a GTX 760. And you could even do some light 1440p gaming. So you could take that 980 Ti money, buy this 970, and then, in a year, if you're somehow bored of the 970, sell it for probably 60 or 70% of what you paid for it. Take that extra money for that 980 Ti, the extra 250, $300, put those together and get some great card from the new line. Once they're out and once they've gone through all the problems with people trying to buy them and something's broken and the drivers suck, and get through that whole period, and then you can buy one when they're pretty mature. Because I don't think you're going to be bored of a 970 in a couple months. Like, even at 1440p, that would still be a perfectly serviceable card.
Yeah, I ran it at ran 1440p with a 970 for a while, and it was fine. Actually, I think you're underselling the long-time value of a 970, because what's going to happen is you're going to hit a lot of people who are looking for that second card around the time you're thinking about selling.
That's true.
Because the 970 has been so popular. I remember that my 680s, when I went to SLI, my second card wasn't as cheap as I wanted it, because a lot of people were like me at the time were looking for that second card to extend the life of their current setup. But with how popular those 970s have been, they should really hold their value.
They should, and they've held their value very well. Even used, they're still selling for like $250, $240, $250. So that's what I would do. Now, like, a 980 Ti is an amazing card, but it'll be a little bit wasted at 1080p. There are a few games that can max it out, but that's just when you're turning on kind of silly features at that point. Like GTA 5, the foliage is very notorious. If you put that on the absolute ultra settings, it'll crush a 980 Ti even at 1080p, but it's not worth it. It's not that big of a visual difference. So
Hairworks, PCSS shadows, HBAO plus. My trigger words.
Yeah, so I would say wait if at all possible, or get a 970 if you want to get something now. But I think, because we get questions like this on a fairly regular basis, I'm curious what you think. I don't think anyone should ever buy a graphics card based on what they want to be doing a year from now.
For sure.
Or even like 6 months from now. Don't buy more than you can use now, because you might be able to use it more later, because you don't know what might change between now and then, and it's just going to get cheaper. So, like, unless you're making a massive leap and you don't want to fool with it for another couple of years, I would say just buy right at the sweet spot of price and performance, and then just flip it a few months down the road.
I would say this is definitely the perfect time to
especially with graphics
play
cards.
it safe.
Yeah, because we don't know anything about what the performance is going to be like on these things. So
Yeah.
on the AMD side of stuff, the Fury has been dropping in price, and keep in mind, for high resolutions, that is better than a 980 Ti. And it's been dropping in price. You can very easily get them for under $500 on sale now. Not the water-cooled one, the air-cooled one, but it's still, I mean, it's a great card. Performs about the same. So not the Fury X, but the Fury. And that's an amazing card for under $500. So those are bound to get a bit cheaper too. So something else to keep in mind. But next question is from Rigo. I've been thinking about what to put in my first build, surprise, surprise, and I think I've settled on what I think would be a good build. This will be used for gaming mostly, and I'm hoping that will last a few years before upgrading, hence the 2 video cards. Oh boy. The parts will probably be bought over about 2 years when I can afford the parts. That's interesting. The parts will probably be bought over about 2 years when I can afford the parts. I would like to read your input and tell me if anything can be done better for a similar price. I want to keep the price below $1,200. I will be putting in the hard drive and optical drive from my current computer into the new one when the time comes. Many thanks. Hope you guys keep being awesome over the years. Huh.
I know we have some thoughts on this. I think we're kind of in line on this one.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Dave.
can tell.
Yeah.
Computers are definitely one of those things that you don't want to buy piece by piece just as you have the money. That's great for model train collections, as I know, and a lot of other things you can collect. But computer parts change way too fast to buy parts, especially over 2 years. Like, I think even 6 months, you're going to end up with stuff that you are going to want to flip, even just 6 months into your time frame, like where you're actually ready to build.
Yeah, I'm curious about the 2 years thing because he wants to last a few years. Do you maybe mean 2 months? I mean, I don't think so. It doesn't look like he mistyped anything. There aren't any other like grammatical errors that make it seem like.
I mean, I definitely have saved up for a computer before for a couple of years.
Yeah, saving up for it's different, but like buying the parts over a couple of years. Rigo, we're not making fun of you or anything. This doesn't make sense. So assuming that is what you meant, wait until you're ready. Wait until like the 3 months before you want to have the thing done and then start buying parts. So you can find deals and stuff and nothing will be that outdated. Because a lot of the parts you're going to pay money for now are going to, especially the video cards, will be so outdated in 2 years. Stuff like the case and the power supply and, the monitor maybe, that's not really going to change.
I have an example, Jeremiah, because the only time I've ever actually done this, back in high school, I was looking to put together my first full build, like from scratch, like, no Franken parts, no old parts from the yellow cased e-machines that I had built a Franken computer out of. Like, I wanted that new build, right?
Right.
And it was going to be my first new build, but I started buying parts as I saw some good deals. I bought a case and a power supply, the two things you said would actually last the longest, and in theory they would, right? They have the greatest chance of actually being used. And then I think I got some fans on sale, and I never actually used them because years later, by the time that I actually had the money to buy the important parts, the case had like the worst cable routing imaginable. It was aluminum. It had glowing blue lights and clear acrylic plastic everywhere. Like, it was a mostly transparent case, as were the fans. I hated both of them. And the power supply was just not what I needed either. So the one time that I have done this, sort of idea where you just build it or buy it as you have the money, even though I bought parts that you would think would be usable years from now, I just never actually used them. It's just not a good idea, I don't think.
And then looking at his list, what is the other bad idea?
Let's take a look here. Nothing jumps out at me.
2 video cards.
Well, would you look at that?
All right, so here's the thing. And Dave and I are kind of broken records. Dave's had SLI a few times. I've had SLI twice and Crossfire once. I would never do that again if I could buy a single card that performed anywhere close to the same amount, because a lot of new games are not going to support Crossfire or SLI, or they won't support it properly at when it first launches. And even if they do support it, you're going to have issues with frame timings and different resolutions and window mode and stuff. It's all just going to be a little more complicated. So buy one powerful card for as much as you can possibly spend, for your card budget, and then you can always flip it later down the road and roll that money into another one if you need to. But I mean, I don't think there's any way I'm going back to a multi-card setup unless things change. And I don't think they will, because it's a very fringe use case. It's honestly, it's not worth it for game developers most of the time to make sure you have good SLI support, because there's so few people using it.
Last year with the 970s and SLI, I think that was my fourth generation of SLI in the last 8 years or so. Fourth time I had done SLI with two cards, and honestly, it was such a bad experience that I think it's completely soured the previous three. Like, it was that bad, where I had two, I'd say, really good experiences with SLI, and the third one was pretty good. The fourth experience last year was just so bad that I'm much more on the side of, if there's a single card that can do what I want, I'll pay a bit extra for that.
Yeah.
Cautionary tale, folks.
All right. One second. I'm just clicking through something. So I would say, Rigo, right back into us and let us know. Let us know if you really want to build it over the next 2 years, something like that. Just confirm with us that's actually your plan, and we'll work with you on maybe a parts list. But honestly, I'd wait until you are close to ready to build. And you can do better than what you have listed for the price, mostly in regards to your processor. I think you can do better than this FX 6300 for a $1,000 build.
Yeah.
Okay. So Chuck wrote into us a couple episodes ago, and he was having a problem. He upgraded his graphics card to a GTX 970. He's had a system blue screen a few times. He played GTA with us, had a blue screen a few times. He has not been able to upgrade his NVIDIA driver since the GTA Game Ready driver because he would get random blue screens of death. He thought his power supply might be too small. It was a 650 watt power supply, so we told him obviously that's not too small. He wrote back in twice, actually. He wrote back in and said, "Hey guys, thanks for the response. I should have clarified. The system was 100% stable on the old driver version. No crashes or problems until he updates to a newer driver. He's not overclocking the GPU, but as Dave pointed out, it's stock overclocked. He updated to a new version of the driver this weekend, did some troubleshooting. The CPU is overclocked. He backed that down, still crashes. He downclocked the GPU as we suggested. He took the sliders down to negative 500 megahertz on the memory and core. It still crashed. Random crashes when the computer was idle and not in use, or when he's just using the web browser. He's had 5 or 6 crashes over this weekend. So he rolled everything back to version 353.06, which is what he was using. Then he wrote back in a couple weeks after that and said, final solution, he fresh installed Windows. Everything was operating normally now, and several other driver issues were resolved as well. So when in doubt, clean install Windows."
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically it. Okay, and then we have one more email for tonight.
Sweet.
Dylan wrote in, and actually this is another response to an email, because we recommended a while back that he get an i3 6100 and a certain gigabyte motherboard, etc. You guys helped me build a build. The reason I'm writing back in is because I looked into my build more specifically the CPU. According to the internet, or specifically Digital Foundry, I need a Z170 motherboard. Otherwise, I can't overclock my 6300. My 6100, the i3 6100 Skylake processor. Is this so? And if it is it a problem? If you guys do need to change stuff, I've left the link below. If not, then yay, thanks. Here's the thing. Since we answered his question, and yes, you would need a Z170 if you want to overclock it, Intel has patched that out. So if you get a motherboard with the latest firmware, or it does a firmware update, or you do a firmware update or something like that, you will not be able to overclock an i3 6100.
I think that specifically they're making sure that none ship with the firmware that can do it. And I'm sure it's not available on any official websites anymore either.
Yeah, probably not. So Short answer is if you haven't bought anything yet, yeah, you can't do it. Sorry. Unfortunately, it was great. You know, everyone was really excited for a couple weeks, I guess. How long was that a thing? It wasn't very long. People got really excited, and then Intel, I don't know why they would take that feature away. It makes no sense. They have the G3258 can be overclocked, and it's like $60. Like, I don't know why they don't want the lower end of the market to be able to overclock stuff.
Yeah, it's doesn't look great for them. Almost petty, yeah.
I'm swapping out the 6100 for an i5 6400, which is a 2.7 gigahertz quad core. Really, if you can spend a little more money, just step up to an Intel quad. I'm gonna drop our recommendation in here, and if you can't, like if your budget is fixed and you can't stretch it a little bit more, let us know. We'll take another stab at your parts list. But yeah, unfortunately, our information since we gave it to you is incorrect. And then one last little thing I want to touch on. So the last couple episodes we've been talking about a short little tech thing, little educational segment before we let you guys go. And I have something I actually want to just complain about a little bit this week. So the G3258 is the darling of cheap builds that people recommend on the internet.
It really pleases me how much this bothers you. This is great.
Okay, but you know why it bothers me?
I do. It's 100% legitimate.
It's a $60 processor that's a dual core that overclocks. Not only does it overclocks like a beast. It's like an old Core 2 Duo. It can overclock like 1.5 gigahertz over its base speed. So like, it's pretty amazing if you want a cheap processor that can do a lot of heavy lifting. Here is the problem. People keep recommending it for gaming builds. Modern games need quad cores or hyper-threaded dual cores. They need more than 2 processing cores. They absolutely need them. It doesn't matter if you overclock the processor. It's just not fast enough anymore. But people still, I get comments on Potato Masher videos all the time of people going, oh, that's not bad, but I'm making my own Potato Masher. It's going to be way faster. And invariably, their parts list has a 750 Ti, which is slower any day of the week. It's like 40% slower. And then they have the G3258 in it. That processor cannot play modern games. It can play a few new ones, but if you are considering a new build, you 100% need a hyper-threaded dual core like an i3 or a quad core minimum. And I had somebody on the GTA 5 Potato Masher video left me a couple comments a few months ago. They had a parts list they were looking at. People leave like those comments pretty regularly. And I flipped through his parts list. He recommended he had a G3258. I told him not to get it. I explained why. I explained that it wasn't going to be fast enough. He said, okay, thanks. He left me another comment on that thread a couple days ago and complained that his G3258 was overclocked to like 4.5 gigahertz and GTA 5 is stuttering constantly and his CPU is locked at 100%. And then I felt patiently reminded him that is an insufficient processor and is below the minimum specifications for the game. And he complained that he spent more on it than I spent on the Potato Masher's processor, and that's like 6 years old. This sucks. So,
cores are cores. It's just, I don't.
No, but a lot of people, they just don't know, and this processor gets recommended a lot. So I'm not mad at people who've been recommended this processor and are disappointed. But if anyone comes to you for help and they want to do gaming, do not recommend this processor. If your grandma needs a new computer to browse the internet, also I don't recommend this processor. She should buy a $250 pre-built. You can't beat that for the money. But there are possibly some cases where this would be an appropriate processor, but it is not for gaming anymore. And old quad cores are still totally fine.
Yes.
The i5 750 was a budget quad core. It was like the i5 6400 is these days, except you could overclock them. And it still is hanging in totally fine. It's keeping pace with the PS4, even if it can't, it can't always beat, like, it can't always, like, go 60 FPS if the PS4 can only do 30, stuff like that. It's not blowing it away all the time, but it is equaling or surpassing it all of the time. So, I don't know. I just wanted to talk about that. Basically, the takeaway from a tech perspective, the educational part is quad cores are now the minimum. Quad cores are hyper-threaded dual cores. You have to have them.
Well, I wanted to ask too, Jeremiah, for your personal computer, when was the last time you ran a dual core in your personal computer?
Never. My first build in 2008 was a Q6600. My laptop had a single core. My desktop before that had a single core because it was an old pre-built. So I went from 2 single cores to a quad core.
Yeah, my first desktop, like full desktop, didn't happen until I was in college. That high school build never happened. But when I built it in 2007, it had a quad core.
Kind of like I had 8 gigs of memory in 2009.
That's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, it was expensive back then too. Oh, well, it wasn't ridiculous. Actually, it wasn't expensive because that was before the bottom fell out of the RAM market. That was before, like, the factories got flooded and stuff. I think I bought my second 4 gigs for like $30 possibly. So maybe it was like the exact same price. That's kind of funny.
Quad core. It's a way of life.
Yep. And which is also why I don't understand. I guess it's because Intel wants people to pony up and buy a 6600K or something. But those i3s, if people would just, like, if people could overclock those i3s, that would be fantastic for budget builds. The problem with those expensive Intel quads is you're jumping from like 120 for an i3 to 230 for the first quad core you could overclock.
Yep.
And that's a really awesome processor, but there's plenty of people who could be somewhere in the middle and would be perfectly happy, but Intel doesn't have to do that. And in that lower end of the market, AMD has always been better because you can overclock everything they make.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of their quad cores are more akin to a hyper-threaded dual core in performance. So, it's pretty fair. Anyway, that is the show for us tonight. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Dave?
No, I think I'm good.
All right.
Just appreciating my hexacore.
Your hyper-threaded hexacore.
Oh, is it hyper-threaded?
Yeah, like you forgot. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show. As always, you can write into casualshenanigans@gmail.com if you want to be a part of the show. And until next time, stay casual.